Folks, Black Star Network is here.
Hold no punches!
I'm real revolutionary right now.
Support this man, Black Media. He makes sure that our stories are told.
Thank you for being the voice of Black America, Roland.
Stay black. I love y'all.
All momentum we have now, we have to keep this going.
The video looks phenomenal.
See, there's a difference between Black Star Network and Black-owned media and something like CNN.
You can't be Black-owned media and be scared.
It's time to be smart.
Bring your eyeballs home.
You dig? Hey, folks, today is Wednesday, August 2nd, 2023. Coming up on Roland Martin Unfiltered, streaming live on the Black Star Network from Birmingham, where I'm attending the National Association of Black Journalists Convention. Donald Trump gets a court date where he is going to have to appear after being indicted. We'll tell you when that is going to take place. Also, in Ohio, the Ohio Supreme Court recently upheld the Reagan Tokes Act, which grants the authority to prison officials to prolong the sentence of certain inmates based on their conduct in prison. We'll talk with an attorney about this, the implication of that for citizens' rights. Also, Missouri teen Derontae Martin was found dead with a gunshot wound to his head in the home of a known white supremacist. We'll speak with his mother, the chief of staff of Campaign Zero, to shed light on the absence of an arrest in this case. Also, in 2023, a white bus driver asked two black men to go to the back of an empty bus. We'll show you disturbing video. Also, I talked with a professor who wrote a book about the issue of, first of all, Professor Timothy Lemire, to discuss how white people form their racial identity. It's a fascinating conversation. It's one you do not want to miss. It is time to bring the funk. I'm Roland Martin Unfiltered on the Black Star Network. Let's go.
He's got it. Whatever the miss, he's on it. Whatever it is, he's got the scoop, the fact, the find. And when it breaks, he's right on time and it's rolling. Best believe he's knowing. Putting it down from sports to news to politics. With entertainment just for kicks, he's rolling. It's on go, y'all. It's Roland Martin, yeah. Rolling with Roland now. He's funk, he's fresh, he's real, the best, you know he's Roland Martin now.
All right, folks, Donald Trump, he is set to appear in court on Thursday after being charged yesterday with 4 felony counts, all tied to January 6th. He is going to be appearing in the court of a black federal judge who has not been kind to folks involved in the January 6th attack on this country. My panel, Robert Patillo, he is the host of People, Passion, Politics, News and Talk 1380 WAOK in Atlanta. Rebecca Carruthers, Vice President, Fair Elections Center, Washington, D.C. Robert, I want to start with you. Judge Tanya Chutkan, she was chosen at random for this, but she is somebody who does not play around when it comes to the law. And so Donald Trump, he is going to have one hell of a task on his hands.
Well, the biggest task that Donald Trump is going to have is trying to create a coherent story, at least a coherent defense. Right now, the Trump defense sounds a lot like the Falcons defense. Just let anybody in, anybody through. They ain't even trying. Well, I had a debate earlier on Iranian TV with one of the Trump supporters, and when they asked the simple question of, well, what is Trump's defense, they started talking about Hillary Clinton. They started talking about Hunter Biden. They started talking about John Kerry and Al Gore and Stacey Abrams and Kamala Harris and all these things. But when it gets down to it, let's look at the charges that are against President Trump. I think the easiest to prove is incitement to or conspiracy to disrupt a official act of Congress. He is on tape saying, everybody, we're going to walk down to Congress, and then we're going to go into the building. I'm going to go with you and go inside the building. What is the defense for that? I'm just trying to figure out, for all the Republicans, for all the conservatives who keep saying, well, this is a political prosecution, the judge is biased, the DA is biased. If you are charged with telling people to go interrupt Congress and you're on video telling people to go interrupt Congress, what exactly is the defense you're going to put up around that? And I think the reason we're hearing so much hemming and hawing, particularly on conservative media, so much discussion about all these distractions, conspiracy theories, is because it's going to be very hard to get away from the fundamental fact that Donald Trump admitted to most of the things he's accused of, and the rest of the things have witnesses or cooperating witnesses, people like Mike Pence, the former Vice President of the United States of America, is going to testify at this trial. Mark Meadows, the previous Chief of Staff to the President of the United States, will testify at this trial. If you look at the unindicted co-conspirators who will probably face charges later, people like Rudy Giuliani and Sidney Powell and John Eastman are all going to have to take the stand. This may be the most damning of all of the charges against the president. He's currently facing 78 charges, which could put him in jail for 600 years. Once the full Fulton County case comes down, they will probably be looking at over 80 felony counts that might put him in jail for the next 1,000 years. I think they have to have a come to Jesus meeting about all this bluster and the campaign trail and attacking the prosecutors. They really talk about how to keep this man from dying in jail.
You know, Rebecca, I've been cracking up laughing, listening to a lot of these Republicans, and they've been talking about the First Amendment, the right to free speech. Here's the problem. What Special Counsel Jack Smith said, and he puts it in the 45-page indictment. Oh, you can say whatever you want. You can even lie. But when you act on interfering, that's criminal.
You know, Roland, this is so interesting watching this play out. After I watched your coverage last night on the latest indictment that Trump has, I actually turned to Fox News because I just had to see what was Fox going to talk about. And just like Robert said, they were talking about, Hunter Biden, or they even tried to say that this Judge Chunkin at one point worked at the same law firm, that at some point in Hunter Biden's career, he also worked at that law firm. So presumably a law firm that's had thousands of associates over the years and multiple partners. That was their only defense to watch, what's happening with Trump. I would say the only winner in this, if you could call it a winner, is Tim Scott. I think by Trump's latest indictment, especially with us seeing who the six, or even figuring out who the six co-conspirators are, this really puts Tim Scott in a good position to actually cinch and get the Republican nomination next year. So it's going to be really interesting watching this unfold. I also want to point out that regardless of which judge Trump got, dozens of judges have tried over 600 people associated with the January 6th insurrection, and over 600 people have been tried and convicted. So Trump is in good company because I expect for him to be tried and I expect him to be convicted.
Here's why I would disagree about Senator Tim Scott. When you look at how people responded on yesterday, he had the most weak, impotent response, Robert, that was actually shameful. And so he keeps talking about these two forms of justice. He looks like an idiot saying all of this.
Well, not in. We'll talk about that, but also he's currently in a fight with Ron DeSantis over whether or not slavery was bad. And just for Republicans who are watching, I just want to let you know: anytime you're talking about whether or not slavery was bad, regardless of if you think you have a point or not, you're losing. You're losing that conversation. That's just a conversation that you can't win. But him and Ron DeSantis going back and forth, and Ron DeSantis then comparing him to Kamala Harris, because I guess that's the only other black person he could think of, and basically saying, boy, go get my sweet tea. I ain't asked you for your opinion on this. So Tim Scott's looked very weak this week. He's looked like he's going to be ineffectual. If you can't go back and forth with Ron DeSantis on the campaign trail, how can we expect you from the conservative side of the aisle to go head to head with Bernie Sanders or with AOC or with Chuck Schumer? And then that leads us into this particular indictment where we've seen Mike Pence come out. My wife said today, I've never heard Mike Pence talk this much and talk this strongly and assertively. He's looked like the real adult in the room on the Republican side of the aisle. Chris Christie has acquitted himself very well during this entire process for Trump. It's as if the voices that have been just the most severely anti-Trump and not trying to kowtow to his supporters, they're coming out looking great. These other ones who are trying to play this middle-of-the-road game, the Tim Scotts, the Vivek Ramaswamys, the Nikki Haley's of the world, where you still want to keep the Trump supporters but also try to distance yourself from him, I don't think that's the eye of a needle that they're going to be able to thread. I think they're going to be weeded out as Trump is weeded out of this race also.
You cannot keep trying to kiss the man's butt. And here's the other deal. You can't keep trying to say, it's these Democrats and they're just, you can try to keep bringing up Hillary all you want to. Here's the deal. We're now in criminal territory, Rebecca, and that is you got to have a defense. And a Fox News television defense don't fly in a courtroom.
Look, these DC juries aren't having it because even on Fox News last night and even this morning, part of the rebuttal was, well, I don't really think that January 6th was that big of a deal. No one I know really is talking about January 6th or even understood that it even happened or even paid attention on January 6th to see that there was even anything that did actually happen on January 6th. But what these folks have to realize, these DC juries, lived this. Living in D.C. when January 6th happened, many of us knew people who worked on the Hill. Many of us lived even in adjoining neighborhoods where we could see that there was something going on. Many of us watched local TV, local radio, was on local social media, and we were able to follow some of the events as it unfolded in real time. So we are very uniquely aware of what happened that day and the subsequent days. We're also very uniquely aware of the things that Trump was doing around town in November and in December. Many of us walk down the street and we constantly see the presidential motorcade, and we see where the motorcade is going. And then you could actually go and see on the White House's website to see actually what the president's public agenda is. So we lived and breathed it. We were around it. We know that it happened. And that's what Fox News and their various defenses that they're talking about right now, it isn't going to play with any DC jury, because a lot of these folks were acutely aware of what happened on January 6th.
Well, that's right. So like y'all can say whatever you want to, but trust me, that means nothing when it's time to go to court. All right, hold tight 1 second. We come back. We're going to talk about this situation in Ohio, folks, that is just strange as all get out, where somebody can actually spend more time in prison than they've actually been sentenced. We'll unpack that next on Roland Martin Unfiltered on the Black Star Network, live from Birmingham, site of the NABJ convention. Back in a moment.
Hatred on the streets, a horrific scene, a white nationalist rally that descended into deadly violence.
White people are losing their damn minds.
As an angry pro-Trump mob storms the U.S. Capitol, we've seen
We're about to see the rise of what I call white minority resistance. We have seen white folks in this country who simply cannot tolerate black folks voting.
I think what we're seeing is the inevitable result of violent denial.
This is part of American history. Every time that people of color have made progress, whether real or symbolic, there has been what Carol Anderson at Emory University calls white rage as a backlash.
This is the rise of the Proud Boys and the Boogaloo Boys. America, there's going to be more of this.
Here's all the Proud Boys, guys.
This country is getting increasingly racist in its behaviors and its attitudes because of the fear of white people.
The fear that they're taking our jobs, they're taking our resources, they're taking our women. This is white fear.
Next on The Frequency with me, Dee Barnes, our special guest, Alicia Garza, one of the founders of the Black Lives Matter movement. We're going to discuss her new book, The Purpose of Power, How We Come Together When We Fall Apart.
We live in a world where we have to navigate, when we say something, people look at us funny, but when a man says the same thing less skillfully than we did, right? Right. And everybody flocks towards what they said, even though it was your idea.
Right here on The Frequency on the Black Star Network.
Hi, my name is Freddie Ricks. I'm from Houston, Texas.
My name is Sharon Williams. I'm from Dallas, Texas.
Right now, I'm rolling with Roland Martin, unfiltered, uncut, unplugged, and undamn believable. You hear me?
So the House Supreme Court has upheld a law that allows prison officials to extend the sentences of certain inmates based on their behavior behind bars. Christopher Hacker and Damon Simmons Jr. challenged the law, saying it infringes on the state constitution's separation of powers between the judicial and executive branches, which allows prison officials to act as prosecutors, judges, and juries in determining extended sentences. And the 2019 law, known as the Reagan Tokes Act, gives the Ohio Department of Rehabilitation and Correction the authority to request the parole board to keep felony offenders in prison beyond the minimum of their sentence range. Joining us now is Ohio attorney Fannin A. Ruckert. to explain this. Attorney Rucker, glad to have you on the show. So, okay, so let's understand this. In fact, there's a similar law in Texas. I know a pastor, former pastor, Terry Hornbuckle, who was convicted of rape, was sentenced to prison, sentence was up. Based upon his actions, based upon him never admitting any remorse, he was literally sent to a psychiatric facility where he still remains because they felt he was still a danger. So what's still strange about this is, so how can you have a court of law that makes a determination, but then there's an arbitrary decision made by the prison system to still keep somebody in prison?
So, Roland, first of all, let me offer, I am so humbled and grateful to be able to join you again, and certainly talking about important legal issues that impact us all broadly. Let me just give some background. As you said, this was passed in 2019 under the guises of criminal justice reform. And what this law said is that for certain first and second degree felonies, which are the most, the highest degree of felonies in Ohio, judges are required now not to give a certain sentence, but have to give an indefinite sentence. They have to give a minimum, and they have to extend that to have a maximum. The law says there's a presumption that folks are going to get out on that minimum. But, as you pointed out, and this is where it becomes an issue, the Ohio Department of Rehabilitation and Correction has the ability to say, we don't think that this person is ready to go out into society, so we're going to extend the sentence. And they can extend the sentence from that minimum up to the maximum, which the statute also prescribed is 50% of the minimum. So if you get a 10-year sentence, now you got 10 to 15. Okay. And so even though you could get out at 10.
Okay, I'm confused here. So I'm used to, I sentence you to 20 years in prison. And then based upon behavior, you might get time off for good behavior. And then you could get out earlier if you're paroled. So you're saying that when somebody is now sentenced in Ohio, there's no precise sentence. It's 8 to 12, and then it's up to the prison to decide whether you get out 8, 9, 10, 11, or 12?
Which is the reason for the challenge. Let me just offer. I was a prosecutor. I was a judge for most of my career before I retired. I spent 13 years on the bench. And as judges, we appreciate our independence and the ability to enforce the sentences that we impose. And why this is a problem is because you got the judicial branch, which says we're going to make the decisions about the person's guilt or innocence, and then we're going to decide the appropriate punishments. And then the executive branch, which is not supposed to be making those decisions, making the decision that even though you sentence them, we're going to allow that sentence to be expanded by our rules and by our determination, and there's no specific parameters about how those determinations are made. That's a problem.
So again, I guess what's strange to me is how then does the prison come to that conclusion? How arbitrary is it? Is there a defined rule? Is there a, like what? How does that even happen?
Yeah, it says that in the law, it says that the DRC, the Department of Rehabilitation and Corrections, may rebut the presumption of the minimum sentence if, and they have about 4 factors. If the person has had an infraction during their prison term, which suggests that they're not ready to go back out in society. If at the time of their minimum sentence, they're classified as a certain level of offender, or if they decided. And then there's a little 3-word, at a hearing. It gives no specifics about what kind of hearing, who's representing, who's represented, whether the offender himself or herself actually has the opportunity to present at this hearing. I mean, it gives no parameters, which makes it really an arbitrary, one-sided decision made by an entity that has at its core keeping folks locked up to say, we're going to keep you for longer. And that's where there's a problem with this decision and, of course, with the law.
Wow. Question from my panel. Robert, you first.
So with this, what are some efforts that can be made to try to change this? Now that you've gone through the judicial system, does it have to be a legislative solution? And what exactly do you think would be the necessary from the community to push through a legislative solution?
So, yes, a good question. You're correct. This was a legislative issue. The court has said, it's okay, it's constitutional. So now the only fix to it can be back through the legislature. And what can the legislature do? They can remove that arbitrary decision-making authority by DRC. Will they? Not likely. Why? Because Ohio, at this time, is a state that is primarily controlled by the same entities that passed this law in 2019. And so for them to reverse themselves, where they have a supermajority, is extremely unlikely. But it does just say, look, folks, be mindful of who you're voting for, be mindful of what they're enacting at the time, and stay out of the courts. I tell my clients then, I told folks who appeared in front of me back then, the best way to deal with the legal system is to stay out of it in the first place.
Absolutely. And just I want for the people online who are always asking these questions, well, I'm not going to vote because I don't like Biden. I'm not going to vote for this and the other reason. There's still these state and local issues that are so crucial. So even if you don't want to vote on national issues, you have to remember that if you want to change laws like this in a state like Ohio, you're going to have to register. You're going to have to vote. You're going to turn other people out. We have the numbers. We just need the people motivated and registered.
That's right. What do we say all the time? All politics is local. We may be excited about presidential elections. We may be excited about governor's races, but all politics is local. It's the local elections that ultimately decide our direction and impact us the most. And this is the perfect example of that fact.
Rebecca.
I want to ask so many questions, but I won't for the sake of time. I'm going to forget my due process question that I have, because I don't even see how this is remotely constitutional and how this is not a violation of due process. But that aside, I'm going to suspend my disbelief right now. Let's assume that the prison system in Ohio is saying that it is their job to rehabilitate those who enter into their penal system. So just to make sure that I'm understanding and viewers watching also understand. So if someone is showing bad behavior, i.e. showing that they're not rehabilitated, how is it their fault that they're not rehabilitated? Wouldn't that actually be on the prison system in Ohio? And wouldn't it be the prison system's fault that rehabilitation hasn't happened?
Well, that's an interesting point. What is the title of the entity that's over this? It's the Department of Rehabilitation and Correction. It's the Department of Rehabilitation and Correction, which says in its name that its primary concern should be the rehabilitation and the correction of those individuals who have to come through those doors. And that's correct. If they're not rehabilitated, there's an entity to blame for that, and that would most likely be the Ohio Department of Rehabilitation and Correction for not ensuring that those who pass through those doors are different than when they come in. Laws like this, rules like this, make it less of a responsibility for those departments to act consistent with their mission and their stated purposes.
So with a quick follow-up then, if it's now the role of the rehabilitation department to rehabilitate, and if they're saying by their own admission that people aren't being rehabilitated, then technically couldn't prisoners sue like under a property claim that they're not getting what they're told that they're supposed to be getting during their experience in prison?
I imagine that they could, and I'm guessing that there probably have been similar cases, but as someone who practices constitutional law and civil rights law, I can tell you that there is a presumption that there are fewer and less enforceable rights that prisoners have than folks who are not incarcerated. So, for example, I do medical malpractice. In medical malpractice, you say that the standard of care that a person received fell below a certain threshold. In prison, that threshold is actually lower because they're allowed the minimum standard of care when it comes to medical treatment that they receive. So is that possible to have a lawsuit saying, look, you all said you're about rehabilitation. I'm not rehabilitated, so I'm going to, I'm entitled to compensation or even release early because you're not doing your job. Sure, that argument can be made, but I would argue that that would be an incredibly high hill to climb for an inmate to successfully argue that it's their responsibility and that they have a constitutional responsibility to ensure that that happens.
All right, then. Phantom, we certainly appreciate it, man. Thanks a lot.
Thanks so much.
All right, Frat. Thanks so very much. All right, folks, got to go to a break. We'll be back on Roland Martin Unfiltered on the Black Star Network. Don't forget, support us in what we do. Download the Black Star Network app, Apple phone, Android phone, Apple TV, Android TV, Roku, Amazon Fire TV, Xbox One, Samsung Smart TV. You can also, of course, contribute to what we do by senior check and money order to P.O. Box 57196, Washington, D.C., 20037-0196. Cash App, $ RM Unfiltered. PayPal, R Martin Unfiltered. Venmo is RM Unfiltered. Zelle, Roland at RolandSMartin.com, Roland at RolandMartinUnfiltered.com. We will be right back.
Happens in Black culture. We're about covering these things that matter to us, speaking to our issues and concerns.
This is a genuine people-powered movement.
There's a lot of stuff that we're not getting. You get it, and you spread the word.
We wish to plead our own cause. Too long have others spoken for us. We cannot tell our own story if we can't pay for it. This is about covering us. Invest in Black-owned media. Your dollars matter. We don't have to keep asking them to cover our stuff. So please support us in what we do, folks. We want to hit 2,000 people, $50 this month, raise $100,000. We're behind 100,000, so we want to hit that. Y'all money makes this possible. Checks and money orders go to P.O. Box 57196, Washington, D.C., 20037-0196. The Cash App is $RM Unfiltered. PayPal is R Martin Unfiltered. Venmo is RM Unfiltered. Zelle is Roland at RolandSMartin.com.
On A Balanced Life with me, Dr. Jackie. How are you being of service to others? Doing for someone beside yourself is such a big part of living a balanced life. We'll talk about what that means, the generation that missed that message, and the price that we're all paying as a result.
Well, now all I see is mama getting up in the morning, going to work, maybe dropping me off at school, then coming back home at night. And then I really didn't have any type of time with the person that really was there to nurture me and prepare me and to show me what a life looked like and what service looked like.
That's all on A Balanced Life with me, Dr. Jackie, here at Black Star Network.
My name is Lena Charles, and I'm from Opelousas, Louisiana. Yes, that is Zydeco capital of the world.
My name is Margaret Chappelle. I'm from Dallas, Texas, representing the Urban Trivia Game.
It's me, Sherry Shepherd, and you know what you watch.
Roland Martin on Unfiltered.
Folks, we talked about this story before. On April 25th, 2021, 19-year-old Derontae Martin was found dead in the attic of a white Missouri man's house with a gunshot wound to the head. The white man, James Wade, is said to be a known white supremacist. Local coroner quickly ruled Derontae's death a suicide. It took months to get a second autopsy, and an impaneled jury ruled Derontae's death resulted from violence, not suicide. But still, 2 years later, no one has been arrested for his death. There are discussions about the DOJ's potentially taking over the case. Katie Ryan is Chief of Staff for Campaign Zero, and she joins us right now. So, Katie, this is strange here. We had the family on before discussing this case, and apparently there was supposedly a party at this man's home. So can you bring folks, those who didn't see us then, bring us today on what the hell happened here? Don't think we have Katie's audio. She might be on mute. So let's, all right, Katie, let's try it now.
Are you able to see and hear me, Roland?
We got you. Actually, we see you and hear you. Go right ahead.
Okay, perfect. Okay. Yes, thank you so much again for using your platform to get this story out and for welcoming us again. And I, spoiler alert, I wish I really had some compelling and exciting and positive news to share about there being movement in this case. We are not there yet. But as a quick refresher for people who have not followed the case of Derontae Martin, you're correct. April 25th, 2021, Derontae, who is a young African-American man, aspiring football star, preparing to go to college to live out his dream of playing football, was taken to a party. So again, this was not a party he intended to attend, but he was taken by some of his friends, acquaintances, we'll call them, in a rural part of Missouri. Derontae was the only Black individual attending the party. The party was for a girl who was a minor at the time, her father known to be a white supremacist. We don't know the full description of what occurred at that party this evening, other than we have the audio of the 911 call in which James Wade is calling the police to alert them that he has discovered Derontae's body shot in the attic of his home. What we do know is that Derontae had surgery on his dominant hand, on his right hand. So he was in a full cast from wrist to elbow. He did die by a gunshot to the temple in the upstairs of this home. And police very quickly took his body from the house. The scene was already cleaned prior to medics arriving. And then his mother, Erica Lotz, had to, by way of sort of telephone, learn both of her son's death and then the whereabouts of his body, which was already at a coroner's.
So that's what's so strange here, the actions of cops in this case. And there literally has been nothing from state investigators.
So as you mentioned earlier, right, the death was ruled a suicide immediately. I believe within 48 hours, Derontae's death was ruled a suicide. So the family had to finance and find a second individual to conduct an autopsy, who very quickly ruled that the death was actually by means of violence, that the distance at which the gun had fired, that it did not appear that it would have even been possible for him to have done this. Based on that, a jury was impaneled, reviewed his case, also said that this was officially a death by violence, not possible for it to be a suicide. One piece of background information is that prior to Derontae's death, there were 2 alleged suicides that had also occurred at James Wade's property. So this is the 3rd death that has occurred at his property. Despite all of this information.
That's a lot of dying.
In one place? Right. Affiliated with one person? Precisely. So what we have seen since then was, since there were conflicting reports after the jury was impaneled and ruled the death homicide, then the investigation was turned over to the Missouri State Highway Patrol. That was to move it out of the local law enforcement. They closed the case and said there was nothing more to examine. So we are still in the streets. We are still pushing for the FBI, for the Department of Justice, for anyone outside of the state of Missouri who can conduct a thorough investigation with integrity that does not have special interest in local politics to actually answer so many of the outstanding questions we have and actually get truth for Derontae and his family.
Have you gotten any sort of feedback from the feds?
No. I will say what's promising is recently the family did meet with Senator Hawley in Missouri, and he has committed to pushing, to whatever capacity he has in his office, to getting a sort of larger platform. There is an upcoming meeting with Congresswoman Bush. She will be meeting with Derontae's family this week, so we are also hopeful that she'll be able to apply some level of pressure. But we have not been able to get the FBI or the DOJ to publicly commit to actually looking at his case, because as far as we've seen, the investigation has been so botched from top to bottom, from the moment of his death. We don't have any more faith in law enforcement and the investigatory bodies in the state of Missouri. Our ask is just at a minimum that we have an external body at the federal level to actually step in and start doing some of this investigating.
Literally a stunning story that makes no sense whatsoever. Rebecca, your first question.
Thank you. Thank you so much for being on here tonight, just to make viewers aware of what's going on. This is a little hard for me because I grew up in a rural state in the Midwest. And I remember family members pulling me aside when I was a teenager and letting me know, do not go to any parties and you're the only Black person there. That was the type of conversation that we had within my family and even my extended family. So my question for you, how often do these things or